Hey, so this video is it's going to cover a lot of topics. First and foremost, it's a stance against influencers in astrology, and it's to raise awareness. But secondly, and probably most importantly, is it's going to be about understanding retrogrades and their energy signature. So we'll get right into it. I'm going to forward this by saying something against influencers and astrology. So influencers say a lot of stuff, and I've been in their circles for over 10 years, as long as I've been studying astrology, 13 years. I've always run across influencers. They're hype beasts. They say whatever they need to get attention, and then they leave you hanging with nothing of substance. In astrology circles, they'll be the ones that preach love and light the most without comprehending anything of depth about the realism of astrology. So they'll use blanket statements to rope people into their pages. They'll make blanket statement content, memes that reflect it. For example, the one that brought me to making this video is a Saturn retrograde influencer meme that I saw, which stated that Saturn retrograde would be a time of karmic resolution. So there's a buzzword there. Karma. Oh, okay, we associate that with Saturn. And there's another buzzword that the love and light circle loves, which is resolution. Put those together and you have a recipe for attraction. And it still bothers me a little bit. Of course, I'm talking about it. It bothers me that these types of posts get hundreds or thousands of likes. But on the other hand, since I'm on the inside looking in, quote unquote, like a third person observer, I have the opportunity to realize bullshit when I see it. So you might be saying, well, how do you know what's bullshit and what isn't? And I'll be happy throughout this video to give you a great example of how I know what retrogrades mean and what Saturn retrograde doesn't mean. But first, we'll get into a general grass touch moment with what retrogrades are. And before we get into that, we'll talk about subjects around it. So, when you look at an astrology chart, you have all types of what I call energy signatures. So, you might recognize what I mean when I say that squares have Saturn energies, or square aspects are Saturn coded, or trine aspects are Sun coded or Jupiter coded. Now, why do I say that? I say that because of the base that astrology has in alchemy. Now, an occultist or an alchemist will recognize a square as belonging to the earth element. They'll recognize the upward pointing triangle as reflecting the fire element. So when we say that a trine is fire coded, we could say that it's Jupiter or Sun coded. Or when we look at a square aspect, we can say that it's Saturn coded because Saturn is the earth element. So that's what I mean. Now you might be questioning that, and you might say, well, how did the alchemists know that? and that's an entirely different subject. And you could watch my video on Platonism and astrology to get an idea of how those things come to be discovered or revealed through contemplation, through meditation. It's the only way to do it. And you'll come to a realization. But the simple way to put it, for example, would be that a square reflects fixedness. Why? Because a square doesn't move as easily as a circle does. Circles are built to move. That's why circles reflect water element, because they're fluid, they're rotary. Squares are fixed because they don't move easily. They're meant to stay in place. And that's the earth element. And there you have it. So we have a bunch of points in astrology that are coded with planet energies. Now, by logic, we would have to say that what we call planet energies transcends the planets. And we would call them spiritual energies, pure and simple. They aren't limited to the planets. They manifest as the planets. So this is why you can say, well, a square doesn't look like Saturn, but it's Saturn coded. You know, a square is a mathematical calculation or a geometrical calculation, but it's Saturn coded. You know, you can look at other points. You can say the MC, the medium coeli, is Saturn coded because it falls into the 10th house, which is Capricorn coded. You know, you say the houses are coded in modern astrology. So everything has codes to them. So when we talk about retrogrades, this is a gray area or an area that's open for explanation or exploration. I've read part of Robert Hand's books, and he even makes it clear that, you know, the school is out on, or the jury is out on what retrogrades exactly mean. We have interpretations of what they mean. Well, I'm here in the year 2026 to say that retrogrades have a very specific code. And what is that? Well, let's look at the effect that retrogrades have in the chart. Now, retrogrades in reality are illusory. They're an illusion because they only give the illusion of going backwards as the earth, quote unquote, passes through them in time and space. It gives the illusion. It's kind of like when you're on the highway and you look at a car's wheels that's going slower than you, and the wheels look like they're turning backwards. Or rather, they aren't going faster, but they're going. You're going at the frame rate, the rate at which your eyes capture light and translates that light, and the rate at which the tires of the car are moving sync up to where it looks like it's going, where the wheels are going backwards. That's the idea of a retrogradation. Basically, it's just happening on a larger scale. So that aspect of it is an illusion. But when you look at it on paper, the actual math of the astrology in the natal chart, simple enough to say that the planet goes backwards in degrees. So when you have something that's going backwards, you're having something that's pulled on a chain. It looks like it's regression when it's a roundabout way of progressing. But in essence, it pulls you back. It ties you back. It's like when you get first place, but upon closer inspection, the judges find out that you actually got second place by a split hair. So it's that type of feeling that it evokes. What does it evoke? It evokes anger, shock, frustration. And that's what happens when you experience the retrogrades. For example, the world famous Mercury retrograde. What happens when Mercury goes backwards? Well, it doesn't make time go backwards, literally. It doesn't even make you feel like you're going backwards psychologically. What it does is it affects Mercury malefically. Whereas Mercury ordinarily likes to coordinate, likes things to be shoelace tight, fluid, perfectly smooth, and fluent. Under the Mercury retrograde, you have things get untied. Your plans get messed up, lost in translation. Two people are telling you go left or go right when you should be staying still. You wake up and the world's upside down. In other words, it has the negative effect of Mercury. Almost like Mercury in Pisces, where things get switcherooed. Other examples. Neptune. What's Neptune? Neptune's an augmentation of Jupiter. What's Jupiter? The king of lightning. What two signs does Jupiter rule? Sagittarius, the fire planet, and Pisces, the water planet. So what do you get when fire and water combine? You get electricity. So when Neptune rules the water sign, Pisces, you get a carryover of that fire and water energy of Jupiter. So you have electricity. What does electricity do? Think back to the famous Neptune and Pisces era story of Frankenstein. It reanimates, or it animates. It brings things to life. It galvanizes. It charges. Think back to the mythology of Jupiter. He's known for what? For his promiscuity. So, Neptune and Pisces specifically belong to the libido of humanity and the psyche. The psychic libido. So, when Neptune goes retrograde, you have energy crises. You have the overconsumption of energy. You have the stress related to the inability to express your libido, restless energy, pent-up sexual energy. So in other words, once again, even for a generally benefic sign like Pisces, under the retrograde, you have the malefic influence. Now, if you have to question the accuracy of my statement, look at famous malefically aligned Pisceans. I would say Harvey Weinstein is a great example. Pisces sun. When we talk about pent-up sexual energy, that turns very malefic, predatory. What other examples can we give, really? I can't think of any more, but we'll just talk about Saturn retrograde at this point. So, with Saturn, we have the archetype of winter. What happens in winter? Things freeze over. The water stops flowing. The goods stop coming in, and you have to think about stockpiling. having reserves. You have to preserve and you have to conserve. So think about that suffix, serve, servitude. That's the nature of Saturn. What part of the body does Saturn rule? Or does Capricorn rule specifically? Which is the sign, one of the signs of Saturn, the knees. What do we call knee work? We don't call it fun. In fact, there's a couple derogatory ways that we could think of knee work. So, Saturn and winter are periods where you get down on your knees and you do the dirty work. It's a time where things get dark. The negrito, as per Carl Jung, the blackening of the soul. Your friends leave you. Everything that assists you leaves you. All the pleasures that came in summer, that started waning away in autumn, leave you. And you're stuck with yourself. You're stuck with all the black spots of your own consciousness, of your own ego, of your own identity or misidentity. And in a very roundabout way, you learn to be very realistic. You learn to accept your faults. You learn to take off the lacquer and sheen of the opposite planet, the sun, the bold, the vital lion, and you learn to be just human. Faults and all. And that's, for a malefic planet, that's as good as it gets. It's coming to terms with yourself and learning to work for others, service to humanity, being a shepherd for others. So, when a malefic planet goes retrograde, you feel pretty fucking bad. You don't feel like you're going through karmic resolution. You feel like you get doubled down on being stuck. You feel like you have no leverage, no mobility. And you do feel karma, but you don't feel like it's being resolved. So in the end, as for this part of the video, I'd like to say that the code associated with retrogrades is Mars. The upfront karmic binder, the chain. Because what does Scorpio do? Scorpio lives in fear of its consequences because it has ghosts all around it. What planet does Scorpio rule? Is ruled by Scorpio. Does Scorpio rule? Mars. So, Mars is the planet of liberation, but it's also the planet of condemnation and damnation in the human day-to-day sense. As to the ghosts that haunt us, the things that we try to repress and suppress away, compartmentalize, until they burst forth like a volcanic eruption. That's the nature of a retrograde. The retrograde says, hey, you thought you were in the clear? Just like at the end of a horror movie, where the guy thinks he's about to get out of the haunted mansion, and he just gets pulled back in because you didn't finish your work. And that's the fullest extent to which I'll agree with any pop astrologer or pop astrology influencer, is that there is a degree of needing to sit with yourself and do your work, so to speak. So I'll give you a couple examples that bolster my statement. The best example I can give that everybody can understand is happening at the moment. We have 3 retrogrades going on right now. We have Saturn in retrograde. We have Pluto in retrograde. And we have now Chiron in retrograde. Chiron's an interesting one. Chiron is a centaur. He belongs to the race of beings that's known for recklessness, partying, party fever, drunkenness, the half man, half horse. But Chiron's special. He's what represents the part of humanity that tries to better itself against those reckless impulses. He's the part that tries to make up for his idiot brothers by being scientific, by being knowledgeable, by healing others, instead of choosing to be reckless. But, so what happens when Chiron goes retrograde? Well, again, people have little idea because they don't know the way to study. So they'll say all types of stuff. And some of it is half true. The need to heal. But that's vague and that's general. The truer way to look at it is to say that Chiron relapses. He falls backwards. He becomes like his idiot brothers. He becomes unwillingly reckless, unable to focus like the archer does, like the centaur Sagittarius does. So what do we have, for example, in a chart where Chiron's retrograde in the 5th house, the house of Leo? Well, what does the lion represent? The lion represents the lion's share. What's the lion's share? All the glory, none of the work. The fat cat. You see, people think Taurus is the foodie, but Leo's the glutton. What do lions do? Anybody who studies them knows. Lions sleep for about 20 hours a day, and they hunt, and they gorge themselves. They eat so much that they can't move for hours, and they're just stuck on the floor panting, with their stomachs gorged. Not a pretty sight. So imagine when the asteroid that becomes reckless, or that makes a person reckless when it goes retrograde, in a person's 5th house of gluttony. Imagine what happens. You relapse into your gluttonous desires. You start to consume more and more. So, what happens when Saturn is retrograde in this person's chart, and that Saturn is conjunct Jupiter? Well, we just talked a little about Jupiter. Jupiter's known for several things. Jupiter's also known for bearing the centaur sign, Sagittarius. So Jupiter, in its best light, is festivity, celebration, expansion, freedom. In its worst light, again, it falls into the Chiron theme, the Chiron retrograde theme. And it bears the energy code of recklessness, of intemperance. So, when a planet like Saturn goes retrograde over it, conjuncting it, you start to feel the karma of excess. You start to feel stuck with an identity, or a real identity of being a very reckless individual. Whereas maybe ordinarily, if you have good Jupiter placements or good Sagittarius energy, you would be feeling like Chiron. You would be feeling professional, happy but secure, faithful, temperate. So you'll be feeling stuck under that Saturn retrograde. This person, in their chart, they'll be feeling the consequences. They'll be feeling very Saturnine. They'll be feeling isolated, rejected, stuck in the dark. And that's what this person's been going through for years, even. Slowly being isolated by the people around them, slowly being disowned by the people around them. This person is in his 60s now. Some of his own family has disowned him, rejected his name. And we've heard about that for a few years. But with the most recent news, it's gotten worse. So finally, let's go to Pluto retrograde and think about what Pluto retrograde means. Well, Pluto, in its worst light, in its malefic sense, represents corruption, defilement. So what happens in this person's chart when Pluto's retrograde in their second house, which is the energy code of Taurus? Well, Taurus means fidelity. Taurus means longevity. Taurus is tree consciousness. So it represents long-standing. It represents the ability to withhold. It represents fortitude. If you get hit once, it's no big deal. Hit twice, no big deal. 3 times, no big deal. I got armor. 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, okay. But when you have such a strong malefic energy in your second house, not only Pluto is a malefic in itself, but to go retrograde where it has another malefic code, the Mars code, applied to it, you have something that eats away at your Taurus consciousness. Something that eats away at your ability to withstand. The natural human ability of the ego to reject influences. To put a wall or a barrier around itself and protect itself. You have that go away. You have your demons come out. Everything that you fought so hard to put up a wall against, those things start clamoring at you and breaking you down. So think about that. These 3 different influences. One that breaks you down, one that makes you reckless, another that makes you reckless and gluttonous. And all 3 retrogrades, which speak to the idea of relapse. And think that this person is heavily influenced by Sagittarius because their ascendant is Sagittarius. And that defines their entire subjective chart. Identity. And when I say that this person just recently relapsed into alcohol after 7 years sober, you'll understand why I'm speaking specifically to the Chiron retrograde, to the 5th house, to the Jupiter conjuncted by the malefic Saturn. to the Pluto retrograde in the second house, eating away at the person's ability to withstand influence. And we've all seen that recently in the past week in the news, pop culture. Brad Pitt. It's his chart. That's who I'm speaking about. And you can look at the chart for yourself and you can see. But that's it. And I think I can rest my case for the effects of retrogrades on that alone. Nowhere in his current experience is that speaking to karmic resolution. What type of resolution can be happening in the midst of your darkest moment? Saturn has been retrograde for several weeks. Pluto has been retrograde for several weeks. Chiron has been retrograde for at least a week. What type of karmic resolution is he going through? Relapse is a karmic resolution? What, did he resolve to be a failure? No. He was stripped away of his persona or his identity, and he's being shown the holes in his armor, the chinks in his armor. And he is going to have to sit with it, and he's either, because of his configuration, going to fall harder and farther, or he's going to pick himself up. He does have some good Venus, good Capricorn aspects, so he'll pick himself up. He'll have a safety net around him. He'll have a means of surviving. But clearly you can see what I'm getting at. That the pop astrology influencers' notion of retrogrades or notions of anything shouldn't be taken seriously. They certainly shouldn't be getting thousands of likes. Because they're just flat wrong. They're just flat filler words and blanket statements to attract people. And with all that said, at this current moment, I'm sure you can look into your own lives and see places of relapse. I saw it when Pluto first went retrograde several weeks ago. Back in April and May, I started having tensions with my neighbor. Why? Because Pluto's transiting my third house, which is the house of neighbors. Now, I had resolved myself, because I have good Taurus energy and I have good Gemini energy, to just move on. Let it go. I did what I could. I stressed myself out. I tried getting people to help me, and nobody did. I got the bare minimum with a lot more effort than I needed to put in until I finally let go. And everything was good for about a month. And then when Pluto went retrograde, it started happening again. The tension came up. The inflammation on my emotions started coming up again. And I started having very bad thoughts about the situation. Suicidal thoughts. Homicidal thoughts. Because I thought it was done with. I did everything I could to make peace with it. I gave every amount of space I could to separate myself from the issue, and still it started coming up again. So there's no type of resolution here, especially not during the retrograde. It has to come after the retrograde. because what these aspects do when they form is they create a kind of like a cocoon experience. The energy builds and it lives within itself until the aspects move out, until the planet shifts sign, or until the planets move out of aspect or move out of the house, or until a group of aspects, positive aspects form, positive stelliums. Then, you have a chance of moving forward. So, needless to say, that's about it for my first point. Influencers shouldn't be taken seriously. They shouldn't be getting as much traction as they do. And I really wish that we would go back to the old world where the less is more. The less people that know, the more knowledge is gained. And but it is what it is. To my second point, I hope you look past my own flaws and having a hard time explaining these things to see the nuggets of truth in there, and come to understand the code that retrogrades work under, or the code that manifests through retrogrades. It's very hard to see for yourself when you don't know how to see it. It takes a long time of research and a long time of knowing how to study, the secret to studying, or the secret to having revelations. It only comes through meditating and through contemplating and through observation. But hopefully you can agree with me that retrogrades are Mars coded. I think I made a good point that they only induce stress, no matter what the planet. Or I hope you at least have food for thought to build your own ideas of what energies might code retrogrades. Anyway, that's about that.